Welcome to this deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring a fascinating connection between risk, development, and even a little bit of skateboarding.
Oh, okay.
Today we're taking a look at Chapter 11 of Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, titled, Do Not Bother Children When They Are Skateboarding.
Yeah.
I have to admit, that title really piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
And joining me to help unpack this intriguing concept is our expert who can, I think, shed some light on the psychological and societal implications of Peterson's ideas.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here. And Peterson, he certainly has a way with words, doesn't he?
He does.
That image of kids fearlessly skateboarding down handrails, it's not just a catchy title.
Right.
It's a metaphor for something deeper,
Yeah.
something fundamental about human nature.
Peterson argues that these kids, often boys, aren't simply being reckless.
Yeah.
He sees their actions as a vital part of development. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think what Peterson's suggesting is that there's an innate human drive, not just to avoid danger, but to actively seek it out
Okay.
and master it.
Yeah.
So it's about optimizing risk.
Right.
Pushing boundaries to understand our limits.
I see. Yeah.
I mean, think back to your own childhood.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that time that you built a rickety fort in the woods?
Oh, absolutely.
And you were convinced it was an impenetrable fortress?
Mhm.
Or that heart-stopping moment when you climbed just a bit too high in that tree?
Right.
Those were risky moves,
They were.
but they taught you something about yourself,
Yeah, they did.
didn't they?
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I can vividly recall those moments. And, looking back, they definitely shaped me in ways I hadn't even realized at the time.
Right.
But Peterson also expresses concern about our modern obsession with safety, particularly when it comes to playgrounds.
Yeah.
He argues that removing playground equipment, while seemingly well-intentioned,
Sure.
can actually backfire. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, he makes a compelling point.
Okay.
If we create environments that are completely devoid of risk, children, they're inevitably going to find other potentially less safe
Yeah.
ways to test their limits.
Makes sense.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
trying to dam a river.
Yeah.
The water will always find a way to flow,
Right.
sometimes in unpredictable
Sure.
and destructive ways.
Yeah, it's interesting that he uses the example of skate stoppers,
Oh, yeah.
these little metal bumps designed to prevent skateboarding, as a manifestation of something much deeper, resentment.
Right, resentment. Yeah.
So what's he getting at there?
Well, yes, the skate stoppers.
Yeah.
Peterson, he delves into this concept by drawing on the insights of thinkers like Freud and Jung,
Okay.
Nietzsche,
Yeah.
and even Orwell.
Okay.
And he argues that those who loudly proclaim to stand for something noble often harbor hidden resentment, and this can manifest in a desire to control others
Right.
and restrict their freedom.
Interesting.
Instead of addressing the underlying issues that might lead to skateboarding in certain areas,
Yeah.
we just try to eliminate the activity altogether.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And Peterson doesn't just theorize about resentment. He shares a really powerful, albeit heartbreaking story
Yeah.
about a troubled friend named Chris to illustrate its destructive potential.
Right.
So what can you tell us about Chris's story?
Well, Chris's story serves as a cautionary tale.
Okay.
He was this brilliant young man who rejected these traditional paths,
Right.
like education and work,
Okay.
and eventually turned to vandalism as an outlet for his frustrations.
I see.
And Peterson describes this idea of the smell of the unemployables, which isn't literal, of course.
Right.
It's more about the societal judgment and even disgust
Yeah.
directed at those who don't fit the conventional mold. You can almost imagine how Chris, feeling rejected and marginalized,
Yeah.
might have internalized that smell,
Right.
feeding his resentment.
Yeah. It's tragic how Chris's potential was never realized.
Yeah.
And you can't help but wonder if there were missed opportunities to help him channel his energy in a more positive direction.
Yeah, it's a sad story,
It is.
for sure.
And Peterson seems to connect this individual story to a broader cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
This kind of anti-human impulse he sees emerging. So how does he make that connection?
Well, Peterson, he views Chris's story as a microcosm of this broader societal trend.
Okay.
He points to examples like that TEDx talk
Right.
that advocated for limiting family size
Okay.
for the sake of the planet.
Yeah.
This idea that humanity is inherently destructive and needs to be controlled.
Yeah.
This deeply troubles him.
It's certainly a controversial topic.
It is.
And Peterson doesn't shy away from challenging the assumptions behind this kind of thinking.
No.
How does he do that?
Well, he's deeply skeptical
Yeah.
of those who claim that humanity is a blight on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
He points to the incredible progress we've made as a species.
Sure.
In a relatively short period of time.
Mm.
We've eradicated diseases,
Yeah.
increased life expectancy,
Mm-hmm.
and connected the world in ways that were unimaginable just a few generations ago.
Yeah.
Peterson believes we have the potential to continue to improve,
Okay.
to find solutions to the challenges we face
Mm-hmm.
without resorting to these drastic measures like population control.
It's a more optimistic perspective.
It is.
And it's interesting how he contrasts this with
Yeah.
the mindset of those who commit acts of violence,
Right.
even bringing up the Columbine shooters.
Yeah.
What's going on now?
Peterson draws a chilling parallel between the ideology of those who demonize entire groups of people,
Okay.
whether it's based on race,
Right.
religion,
Mm-hmm.
or even humanity as a whole. And the kind of thinking that can lead to violence and destruction.
Yeah.
It's a complex and sensitive issue,
It is.
but it highlights the danger of embracing ideologies
Sure.
that dehumanize others.
It's certainly a lot to ponder.
It is.
But let's shift gears a bit and explore Peterson's observations about gender dynamics.
Now,
He
it's-
specifically addresses the struggles boys face in modern education
Right.
and the pressures they experience in society.
Yeah.
What are his thoughts on that?
Well, Peterson, he observes that boys tend to be more inclined towards disobedience
Okay.
and independence.
Yeah.
Traits that often clash
Right.
with the structure and expectations
Yeah.
of traditional educational settings.
Right.
So.
He also brings up the gender disparities in university majors, pointing out the potential implications for marriage and family formation down the road.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So, more women are graduating from college than men.
Yeah.
Sounds great,
Yeah.
right? But Peterson points out an interesting wrinkle.
Okay.
If you're a highly educated woman
Yeah.
looking for a partner
Right.
who shares your intellectual drive,
Yeah.
the pool
Right.
might be shrinking.
I see.
This has implications for family dynamics,
Right.
career choices.
Yeah.
It's a complex landscape
It is.
that we need to consider.
It's fascinating how these seemingly disparate topics,
Yeah.
skateboarding, resentment, gender dynamics,
Yeah.
all seem to weave together in Peterson's analysis.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I do.
Are we seeing a pattern emerge here?
I think Peterson is suggesting that there's a deeper connection
Okay.
between the way we approach risk,
Yeah.
responsibility,
Right.
and individual development.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how we can encourage healthy risk-taking and resilience, not just in childhood, but throughout life.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's about fostering a culture that values both safety and challenge,
Okay.
support and autonomy.
Right.
It's a delicate balance.
It is.
And there's no one-size-fits-all approach,
Sure.
but it's a conversation worth having.
Well said.
Yeah.
And before we move on, I'm curious to hear what's standing out to you so far.
Okay.
What are your initial reactions to these ideas?
Yeah, sure. What strikes me is how Peterson connects these individual struggles, like Chris's,
Yeah.
to broader cultural trends.
Right.
It's like he's saying our societal anxieties and fears manifest themselves in individuals,
Yeah.
like Chris.
That's a thought-provoking idea.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we, as a society, are projecting our own unease onto those who don't conform to certain expectations.
Peterson seems to think so.
Okay.
He points to the example of those who advocate for limiting population growth,
Right.
who view humanity as a threat to the planet.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they see human beings as a kind of virus,
Wow.
a force of destruction that needs to be contained.
Right. But Peterson pushes back against this idea, right?
He does.
He believes in human potential,
Yeah.
in our capacity to solve problems,
Right.
and create a better future.
Yeah.
He highlights the incredible progress we've made as a species,
He does.
from advancements in medicine
Uh-huh.
to technological innovation.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
And he challenges us to consider whether those advocating for such drastic measures like population control might actually be masking a deeper resentment towards humanity itself.
Okay.
Are we so focused on the problems that we're overlooking the solutions,
Right.
the inherent goodness
Yeah.
and creativity that humans are capable of?
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah, for sure.
And it ties back to his critique of the patriarchy narrative,
Right.
this idea that men are inherently oppressive and that all hierarchies are based on power and exclusion.
Yeah, so Peterson, he challenges that narrative,
Okay.
arguing that it's overly simplistic and doesn't account for the complexities of human relationships and social structures.
Right.
He uses examples of men who've dedicated their lives to improving the lives of women,
Okay.
like Arunachalam Murugantham,
Okay.
the tampon king of India, who invented low-cost sanitary pads to empower women in rural communities.
Those are inspiring examples.
There they are.
And they certainly challenge the notion that men are inherently oppressive. Peterson also points out that hierarchies often form organically,
They do.
based on competence and ability, not just power dynamics.
He argues that in any field, whether it's sports, business, or even academia,
Right.
there will naturally be those who rise to the top based on their skills and talents.
Yeah,
This doesn't mean that power can't be abused,
of course.
but it does suggest that hierarchies aren't inherently bad or unjust.
It's interesting to consider how this relates to his discussion of the toughening up process.
Right.
This idea that we need to develop resilience and grit to navigate life's challenges.
Yeah, he uses that memorable analogy of the Charles Atlas ad with the skinny kid getting sand kicked in his face.
Right.
That image perfectly captures the vulnerability we all feel at times.
We do.
But Peterson's point is that we can overcome that vulnerability not by avoiding challenges,
Right.
but by confronting them head on. It's like that famous quote,
What is it?
"What doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
It makes you think about the way we often try to shield people from discomfort and adversity.
Right.
Are we doing them a disservice by not allowing them to experience those necessary growing pains?
It's a delicate balance,
It is.
and it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But Peterson seems to be suggesting that a certain amount of struggle
Yeah.
is not only inevitable,
Right.
but essential for personal growth.
He also touches on the potential consequences of this overprotective impulse, particularly for men. He argues that if we push men too hard to feminize, to suppress their natural inclinations towards assertiveness and risk-taking,
They'd be drawn to more extreme ideologies as a way to reclaim those aspects of themselves?
it's a controversial statement,
It is.
but one that's worth considering.
What do you think?
Could it be that when men feel like they're being told to deny a fundamental part of who they are,
Yeah.
they seek out those outlets elsewhere,
Right.
sometimes in unhealthy or destructive ways?
It's certainly a possibility.
It is.
And it makes you think about the importance of creating spaces for men to express their masculinity in healthy and constructive ways.
And it highlights the need for a more nuanced and balanced conversation about gender roles and expectations.
Right.
Peterson isn't advocating for a return to some outdated patriarchal model of masculinity.
Right.
He's calling for a more holistic approach that recognizes the value of both masculine and feminine qualities in both men and women.
He also uses a fascinating comparison between Nelson Muntz from The Simpsons and the edible mother archetype to illustrate the dangers of excessive coddling.
That's such a clever way to get the point across.
On one hand, you have Nelson, this tough, self-reliant kid who, despite a difficult upbringing, embodies a certain kind of resilience.
Right.
On the other hand, you have the Oedipal mother, a figure from Greek mythology, who represents this smothering overprotectiveness that can stifle a child's development.
It's almost like a modern-day fairy tale.
Yeah.
With Nelson representing the triumph of resilience over adversity and the Oedipal mother symbolizing the dangers of shielding children from the realities of the world.
Peterson seems to be suggesting that by trying to protect children from all forms of discomfort, we might actually be hindering their growth and preventing them from developing the skills they need to thrive.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder if we're creating a generation that's ill-equipped to deal with the inevitable challenges of life.
And it raises important questions about how we can encourage resilience and a sense of personal responsibility in a culture that often prizes comfort and security above all else.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But Peterson's insights certainly provide food for thought
They do.
as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of parenting and child development.
It's like we're caught in this, cultural tug of war
Yeah.
between protecting and empowering, between sheltering individuals from hardship and equipping them to face it head on.
Peterson seems to be advocating for a delicate balance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Recognizing the need for both safety and challenge.
Absolutely.
In our lives.
He argues that by constantly trying to eliminate all risk and discomfort,
right,
we may inadvertently be creating a society where individuals are ill-prepared to handle the inevitable setbacks and difficulties that life throws their way.
And he specifically expresses concern about the potential impact of this overprotective impulse on men.
Yeah.
He suggests that by pushing men too strongly towards what he sees as a more feminized ideal, we risk alienating them and driving them towards more extreme ideologies.
He uses the popularity of films like Fight Club to illustrate this point.
Oh, interesting.
The film, with its raw depiction of masculinity, violence, and rebellion, resonates with men who may feel like their traditional roles and outlets for expressing their masculinity are being stifled or demonized.
It's like they're seeking a sense of belonging and purpose in these more extreme narratives, finding a space where their strength and assertiveness are not only accepted, but celebrated.
Peterson's not condoning violence or aggression, of course.
Right, of course not.
But he's urging us to have a more nuanced conversation about masculinity.
Okay.
One that recognizes the importance of strength, courage, and responsibility as valuable traits in both men and women.
It makes you think about the unintended consequences of our cultural shifts.
Yeah, it does.
In our efforts to promote equality and dismantle harmful stereotypes.
Right.
Are we inadvertently creating a void?
Possibly.
That could be filled by something far more dangerous?
It's a thought-provoking question.
It is.
And it brings us back to Peterson's central message in this chapter.
Okay.
Do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
Right.
It's a metaphor, of course, for allowing individuals, particularly young people, the freedom to explore, to test their limits, and to develop the resilience they need to navigate a complex world.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to step back and let them fall. Let them learn from their mistakes and build themselves back up stronger.
It goes against our instinct to protect.
It does.
But Peterson argues that by shielding individuals from all forms of risk and discomfort, we're ultimately doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
We're depriving them of the opportunity to develop the grit and determination they need to face life's challenges head on.
So what are the takeaways from this deep dive?
Yeah.
Peterson has given us a lot to ponder.
He has.
The importance of risk-taking.
Yeah.
The dangers of overprotection. The complexities of gender dynamics, and the role of resilience in navigating life's challenges.
He's challenged us to question our assumptions.
Yeah.
To look beyond the surface.
Right.
And to engage in thoughtful dialogue about these important issues.
He's reminded us that growth often comes from discomfort.
It does.
From pushing our boundaries and confronting our fears.
And he's left us with that powerful image of children skateboarding.
Yeah.
A symbol of youthful daring. And the human spirit's innate drive to explore. To master. To overcome.
It's a reminder that life is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
And that the bumps and bruises along the way are often the most valuable lessons we learn.
For sure.
So embrace the challenge.
Yeah.
Push your boundaries.
Push them.
And remember, sometimes the best way to learn is to let go.
Yeah, I agree.
And who knows?
Who knows?
You might just surprise yourself with what you're capable of achieving.
For sure.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
It was a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing yourselves to grow.
See you next time.